Hey, welcome to another episode of Straight from the Desk. This time we will paint the fantastic new Abaddon model from Games Workshop. I really like the redesign that they've done. I think it's quite funny when you remember the old model when it came out. It was a very cool model, and if you look at it now, it hasn't aged all that well. So I think the redesign is just perfect because it's like that version of Abaddon that you always wanted to have. So in the first chapter we will take care of how to paint the black armor. In theory, we will be starting with a Chaos Black spray painted model. Then we'll start to apply a base color mixed from black, dark sea blue and white to create like a very dark grey. And we'll highlight that using white, and we're not going all the way up to white, but we're going quite bright. And the result is like a blue-grayish material that is in the shadows still a little bit too light. So we will be using glazes of Secret Weapon Alt Rust and glazes of the Chimera Violet. And in the end we will receive a material that really looks very nice and deep in the shadows and still has a little bit of color interest. Alright, so let's see how that looks on the model. Okay, so here we are with the Abaddon in place, and you can see we started with the Chaos Black spray paint out of the can. And the model is partly assembled, not totally, and you will see that there are still some of the elements not really attached, so we can take them off and really get all the way in here to really be able to paint all that lovely detail. The fit of the figure is amazing, so we can actually just pop on and off the parts to see what we are really able to see. And we will start with a really stripped to the core Abaddon. So let me get off these parts here, and I spray painted them separately. Let's start with the black armor first. You can see on the palette we have some model color dark sea blue, one of my all-time favorite paints, the Schmincke Titanium White. Here we have some black from P3, and back here we have some of the Chimera Violet. It also looks black here on the palette, but if we drag it out, we can see it has that lovely super dark purple tint to it. Okay, we will start mixing a nice dark gray from the dark sea blue, some of the black, and a tiny bit of the white. And we will start applying that to our black armor parts. Consistency wise, we're working with a heavy base tone consistency, so we can cover that surface really in one go. It's a little bit hard to see actually here on cam, but you can note the difference here regarding the gloss actually of the surface if you compare this to that part, and it also appears slightly more blue. Okay, so I will put the base color on all the black parts, and we'll be back once that step is done. So here we are with the black base coat in, or our very dark gray base coat actually in place. And the next thing that we will do is we will add our first highlights. And when you paint black, you have to be careful that you don't add up with something that's too gray, so, or too bright overall. So we're mixing like a lighter gray by adding white, but we're trying not to really distribute it over a very large area. We're also working with between heavy and medium base tone consistency, and we're first just placing our highlights. And I'm also going here for more like a zenithal light approach, so highlight from the top and with like an intermediate shade mixed from the two, about the same consistency, can just place that next to each other to start softening things out already a bit. And you can see I'm really not trying to get that gray tone over a lot of the Armour areas. I'm really trying to stay very focused in like the placement of the highlight. Here those will be really almost entirely covered later on with the larger shoulder pads, so we're not investing a lot of work in there. We will later on definitely do a little bit here of a highlight to the edge, but for now we will just leave it like that. Okay, we'll continue placing those strong highlights here also along the middle line of the leg guard and also here along the thigh, just with really layers of paint, opaque paint, and start softening them out as I did here, and put it back for the next step. Alright, as you can see, I continued here with the white-gray reflection dots and highlight lines here on this side, and you can also see here, even to that half of the shoe, we added the highlight. And I've actually done this here not using layers and glazes, but more with the loaded brush. And I will just show you how we did that on this leg armor. And we will use our brush loaded here in the back of the brush with, this time we're going a bit thicker, so we're working with about a heavy layer consistency. And we're adding some white to the tip of the brush, turning the figure around so I can have like a good position to pull the brush, and we're adding that in here, and we're just applying quite a bit more pressure on the tip of the brush here, the beginning of the brush movement, placing it down and softening it out. Let's turn that around to see how it looks. Okay, looks already quite good. You can see in here we still have like a little bit of the pure white. We don't want that. So I'm just taking the brush and carefully swiping over the surface. Okay, that should be good. We'll do the same to the other side. So first, our dark color in the back of the brush. Do a little bit of white on the tip. We'll add that here. Cleaning the brush and also softening that out here. A little to the other side. And that looks actually already quite nice. Here where I actually touched this area here in the middle, that ripped off some of the paint from the surface. So we have to make sure that this is entirely dry, and mixing like a brighter shade here on the surface, and we're just applying that again as a layer. Slightly darker to soft things out. And with a clean brush, just feathering that out here. And this way we get like a really nice gradient over a large area like that. And a reason for why we started using the paint here in the beginning thicker is because we really want to get that gradient to that darker paint, and because the contrast is so hard sometimes, or because the contrast is so strong, sometimes it's a little bit easier if you use slightly more opaque paint to start with. So for these areas here, also up here, keep in mind that there will be that exoskeleton on top. So we have these pistons here running across, same as here. So we want to have that transition or the bright highlight tone also visible to both sides. For the top we don't need to do so much because it will not really be visible here for the top of these inner shoulder pads, but we still want to add like a little bit of a transition there, so just in case we can see something shining through. So here it's quite nice to actually use the loaded brush for that. It's important to notice for the loaded brush, use more pressure at the beginning of the brush stroke, and the further down you go, reduce the pressure a little bit. And you can see we can create like really nice blendings. That is something that really comes with practice, is like the amount of white that you need for what kind of transition, or the intensity of the transition. So this is something that you really need to practice. Also something to keep in mind is actually for the loader brush, you have actually a little bit more time than you think to do the transition. So you can actually be a bit more relaxed when you place the loaded brush, and it's not, you don't really have to rush it. You can just place it down and soft things out. And sometimes it's good to wait a little to actually be able to judge what you've been doing before. So I think for now this already looks pretty interesting. We'll continue adding like little bits of highlight here in that area again, using a bit more like layers and glazes again. But that area here will be really almost hidden in the end, so we don't need to pay all that much attention to these transitions at the moment. Okay, and we need a little bit more of that highlight tone we've been using previously, so it's about the same intensity of highlight tone that we've been using before, and we need that to pick out some of these small details such as the rivets, and also to add a little bit of a lining to these elements here, just to have them nicely visually separated.
sometimes it can help to add a little bit of the lining work. I'm trying to hit these edges more with the side of the brush tip than actually with the tip itself. This way I have a little bit more control, or it's a little bit easier actually to just hit it with a very thin line. Continue a bit darker here, also for these larger elements like the shoulder pad. Actually, in the end, this here is the area that will be visible, so it's not really the top where we added the transition before, but the lower side here, and we want to make sure that it's nicely separated from the plates underneath. A bit darker again. And we will also, at least to these super large plates here, add a little bit of like a secondary highlight here, just close to the outer rim. First place it, and then feather it out a bit with a clean brush. To have a little bit more of a play with the tones going on. This is a little bit like the edge highlight that we also find in the box art. Here in this case, this is not intended to be, this is like an edge highlight, but if you imagine, we will have like the reflective gold or brass trim to the side, and that would have some light bouncing back actually also on the black armor, so we want that to be reflected here with like a painted on highlight as well. You can see I also went like quite bright, and this is what I said before, when you have like the highlight running next to both sides of the piston. So once the piston is painted here, we can still have like a nice and visible highlight to both sides of it. Alright, so we'll continue with the lining work, but I think you got where this is going, and we'll be back to do some detailing work. Okay, so you can see I've continued detailing things out a little, and I've added a few scratches also here to this leg and also to the upper area here, and that's what we'll do next. First we'll work with some of that black. You can see one advantage of starting not with a pure black, but with a very dark gray here as a base tone. We can see those lines painted in pure black on the surface. First the dark lines, and then we're continuing with some of that lighter gray. And we're adding a very thin highlight line just next to, actually not next, but just underneath the line that we've just been painting. And we're going a bit brighter here by adding more white. We're not trying to get like one line that is equally bright and equally thick. We're trying to just get like a little bit of a change here in how dramatic that highlight looks. So overall, I'm really happy with that first stage here for the armor. We'll continue like that and still keep some of that purple color variation for later on. So far I really like the contrast, and I also really like the smoothness. We have to keep in mind that most of these areas here on the top of the torso, and also here later on with the shoulder pads, will be covered once we have the other armor plates in position. Okay, so hope you like that so far. See you for the next step. Okay, so here we are with the details in place, and one thing that I said that I want to add is a little bit of color variation, and this will be, I think, quite hard to see, but we are now having like quite a blue, bluish black. So you can see on the palette we have that violet from Chimera Color, which is super dark, and back here we have some secret weapon Old Rust, which is like a red, between red and violet brown. And we will use those to like push the color a little bit back into like a something that we can perceive as black. And we're just first starting with a light glaze from that super intense violet. And we're thinning it down with water. And we're adding that to the shadow areas here. And you can see that we just see like a very, very little impact of that. But we don't want it to be purple in the end, so we have to make sure to really use that careful. We will also play a little bit here with our Old Rust. Again, as a light glaze. And for a step like that, it's really quite important to go as thin as possible to not ruin the transition that we've introduced previously, and to also not have really like a visible color going on. We just want to have like that slight tint there. As we have to do that to all the areas, I'm pretty sure we can show some of that in speed up. This is now almost just pure water, but as I said before, this is really just to push it a little bit out of that blue-gray direction. And feathering that out with a clean brush to not really stain the highlights. I really like the look of that, and let me get the other pieces in place and prepare them so we can also continue here with our glazes. Alright. Okay, so that looks already quite a bit more impressive with having all the other torso parts in place. And you can see I continued also here on the top, shaping things out a little, here in the back as well. Here I've already added the purple and red glazes, and we'll continue with that also on the other parts. Make sure that the glaze is thin enough. Yeah, should be good. Really for areas like that, these glazes can be really nice to get like a sharp differentiation between like an upper edge like this and the more shadowy part here. Same to the other side where I just introduced the glazes. And yeah, we'll continue a little bit with that, also on the other additional parts, to have like the same kind of tone going on everywhere. But I think I really like the output of that. And this concludes the black armor part so far, and we will be back to paint the head as the next chapter. Alright.